Hey, creative. Are you ready to discuss profits, the money, the ways to make it happen? The Profitable Creative Podcast is for you, the creative, how you define it. Videographers, photographers, entrepreneurs, marketing agencies, you get it. CEO of Core Group and author Christian Brim interviews industry experts, creative entrepreneurs, and professionals alike who strive to be creative and make money at the same time. Sound like you? Tune in now. It's time for profit.
Welcome to another episode of The Profitable Creative, the only place on the interwebs where you will learn how to turn your passion into profit. I am your host, Christian Brim. Special shout out to our one listener in Edmonds, Washington, not Edmond, Oklahoma. It's Edmonds, Washington. Joining me today is Kelly Schuknecht of 2 Mile High Marketing. Jawohl, Kelly.
Was that German, Christian?
Two of my children speak German, and I only know enough that when they're saying Vater, they're talking about me. So
okay,
the little shits.
Well, I have a very German name, but don't speak a word of German. So
Yes.
I'm actually Italian, but I married a German. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know like 3 words. So
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think I can count. That's about
no,
it.
it really doesn't. It just gets yeah. All right, so Kelly, tell us. I'll stop soon, I promise. Kelly, tell us about who you are and what you do.
Yes. Well, I'm gonna say the words here, not CEO, but I am the Chief Elevation Officer at 2 Mile High Marketing. Important word.
I see what you did there. Elevation.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And I work with business owners and thought leaders who want to establish their thought leadership platform. So helping them with establishing that thought leadership platform, which might look like getting speaking events, getting podcast interviews, getting in front of their target audience. We work also with folks who want to write a book. I see that you have your book sitting there. So, you know how important it is to have that tool in hand as a thought leader. So we help support thought leaders in building their platform online.
I love that. I also love the fact that, marketing is responsible for all of these words that are made up, like thought leadership, like, and so many of them we just take for granted. We're publishing a show. Actually today we released an episode on out-of-home marketing, and I didn't know what out-of-home meant. I had to pause and ask the guest, like, what does that mean? And he explained it, and I'm like, oh, so it's non-consensual marketing. And he said, well, yeah, I guess you could call it that. And I'm like, I'm trademarking the name. That's it. So in your mind, what is thought leadership?
Yeah. So I like to think of it. I really think any one of us can be a thought leader if we have that kind of drive to get push our message forward and to share our message with the world, right? So anyone who has a message to share, and I really think it's important to not just put certain people on a pedestal and say that, you have to be a CEO of a company, or you have to be, whatever, right? Some big important person, right? I started my thought leadership platform on LinkedIn as an employee in a company, a director of marketing, and I started just developing content and became known on LinkedIn within my network for very specific topics, right? So there were just things that were that I felt drawn to talk about online, and I had no reason to do that. I just really, for one example, I'm an advocate of remote work. I've worked remotely for 18 years, so I talk a lot about remote work and the benefits of remote work on LinkedIn. And I have people in my network who will say to me all the time, like, "Oh, you're like the thought leader in remote work," right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like that necessarily, but I think that, that we all have stuff inside of us, experiences that we can share with the world. And that, we can develop our thought leadership through the practice of developing that content and putting it out there.
Yeah. So, when I hear thought leader, I'm like, I don't know that I want that moniker. I definitely don't want to give it to myself because, and that seems like hubris. But the way you described it, I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of them that I'm passionate about. And so if espousing those things and promoting those things is thought leadership, then I guess I am. I feel more comfortable if someone else called me a thought leader.
Right,
Not,
exactly.
yeah.
Well, but we take our own knowledge and experiences for granted, and I am the perfect example of that because I like to say I was the person behind the person most of my career, right? I was the person supporting a CEO and doing a
Mm-hmm.
lot of work behind the scenes, and nobody knew who I was necessarily, right? But when I started putting myself out there a little bit more and developing some content that I was putting online, I was just doing it again, like no real reason, just more of just I was trying. It was like a muscle I was trying to develop in
Okay.
myself. And when I started my business last year, I had no idea how that was going to go, but I announced that I was doing it, and I had people coming to me because they had started to know what I was doing, right? Like I wasn't
Right.
so hidden. I thought I was, but I wasn't.
Mm.
People knew my experience and what I had done, and knew of me, and so it's. I just think we do take those things for granted. Like we don't realize that the experiences we've had or the things that we're passionate about are not the same for everyone, right? So again, like I said, my one of the things that I'm passionate about is remote work because it had a huge impact on my ability to be a working mom and to have a really successful career. And if it hadn't been for remote work, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I wouldn't have been able to work hard and still be available to my kids, right? So I talk about that online. And because of that, like I realized that, not everyone has had these experiences that I have. Not everyone has worked from home for 18 years.
Right.
It's a lot more common now than it used to be, right? But I know how it impacted my life and my kids and my family. And so I'm passionate about it, right? And so those things that just, if we really think about what brings us life, what makes us excited, and we start talking about those things. Another thing for me is books because I'm an avid reader. I spent 10 years running a publishing company. And so I talk a lot about books online as well. And so people will come to me because of that as well.
Right.
So I think that it just really is, we have those thoughts inside of us. And it's hard to, you think it's kind of self-indulgent to call yourself a thought leader and put yourself on that
Right.
pedestal, right? It's a lot easier to prop somebody else up. But I think that, it's like a muscle, and if you start to develop some content around the things that you care about, people start to notice that.
So Google Alphabet has been reaching out to you for your thought leadership at home working. No. No.
I do not know this out of home marketing. I need you to tell me what this is.
No, it's non-consensual. I can't tell you. Okay, so you said you just started your business. So what did you do immediately prior?
Immediately prior to starting my business, I was in marketing
Okay.
in the accounting space. And actually, I
music
love
to
the
my
title of
ears.
I love the title of your book, Profit First, because we were the leading provider of virtual CFO services for creative agencies. So I was in the more creative space, the marketing world, not the accounting world, but we were marketing those virtual CFO services specifically for marketing companies. So kind of best of both worlds. When I left the company, I then started my own marketing agency.
Yes.
And have that background also in the finance side. So I understand that, although I'm probably not I probably need to read your book. Put it that way.
Well, the good news is you're getting a copy, so you'll have the opportunity. I can't think of anybody, and that's honestly why we refocused our target market 3 years ago to serve creative industries, is because there's nobody that needs more help with those things than creatives, because their brains don't work in a linear fashion. and it's sometimes a real struggle, even to the point where people are like, I can't learn it. I can't learn what I need to know. And I'm like, no, you have the intelligence, you have the capacity, you're just not comfortable with it. And
Mm-hmm.
um, it's important to get those two together. I mean, you can even think about it in the marketing sense, like the creative element is important, but the analytical strategy behind it is just as important, and executing on that strategy is just as important. So if you can get those two things aligned, the creative and the analytical, just to be real base about it, you get magic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm assuming that, having been in accounting, you weren't real worried about your finances when you took that leap, or were you?
Well, I think anyway, I'll say I had been thinking about starting my company for 2 years.
Okay.
And what held me back was the financial side of it, right? Like, I
Okay.
have a steady paycheck, like I have
Yeah.
benefits, I have all those things, right? And so for me, I really struggled with taking the leap.
So maybe
However,
even that knowledge made it harder. Like, if you didn't know anything about accounting, it might have been easier because you wouldn't have known the
I think
risk.
I didn't trust myself. So it wasn't really, it was more of just like, not that I didn't trust myself, but I just didn't trust the process, right? I just was like, how do you get that first client? How do once you take that leap, how do you start to, in my mind, I wanted an agency, not to be a solopreneur providing
Mm-hmm.
services just myself. I wanted to develop a team. So it's like, how do you get from here to there? Like those things
Mm-hmm.
held me back. What pushed me off the ledge was the company that I worked for was acquired and I lost my job. And so that was the moment of, okay, like you either
Let's
do
do
it
this.
now or it's never going to happen. Right. And so I did it. And I've been shocked and amazed at how quickly things can move when you decide you're really going to do it.
Well, kudos to you. Congratulations. I think there are a lot of people that stay stuck in that space and don't ever pull that trigger. Um,
Yep.
I've interviewed some folks where, that decision was made for them, kind of like you, like, okay, I don't have a job. And then in some ways that might make it easier. But I don't know. I think it's always a hard decision to bet on yourself, rather
Yes.
than rely on someone else. But those of us that are entrepreneurs, we just know there's a gut feeling like, yeah, no, I'm worth more than I'm being paid. Like, I can do more than they're requiring of me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, not everybody's cut out for being an entrepreneur, because you've got to make the decisions, and there's only one person to talk to whenever it goes wrong. And that's a hard road. It's a very hard road. So
Yeah.
congratulations. I'm proud of you.
Yeah. Thank you.
So what, in, the last 12, 18 months, has been the biggest challenge, or maybe the biggest thing you didn't know that you've learned?
With starting an agency.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. So, we talked about the like betting on yourself. I think so. I mean, I feel like the starting of my agency was just like, it was just like those initial decisions,
Mm-hmm.
like the decision to fully lean in and do it, right, was probably the hardest thing. And since then, I honestly haven't had moments to even think. I've been so busy. I've hired 3 people. We are, so I think right now my challenge is just figuring out how to scale in a way that I can not be drowning. So good problem to have, just a few months in.
Yeah, absolutely it is. I mean, yeah. And scaling, hiring employees is usually that first inflection point that entrepreneurs show up where like, okay, I can't do all this myself. Physically, I don't have the talent, I don't have the time, whatever. I've got to have help. And that's usually the first point where you start having problems because that's a different animal. You sound like you had experience. I didn't have experience managing people or hiring
Hmm.
people or building a team. And so I spent a lot of wasted effort doing it wrong. You sound like didn't have those problems. Um, but, you know, being able to control the growth and make money is one of the biggest challenges I've ever had. I mean, for the longest time, it was just grow, 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 and it was focused on the top line. And my excuse for not making as much money as I should was that, well, I'm investing it back in the company, and that's a great rationale to not make a profit or not make as much profit as you should.
Hmm.
Um, have you struggled with any of that I did or no?
Yeah, well, so I'll say when I mentioned I was in publishing, right? And I around 30 years old, I was the executive vice president of a publishing company, and I remember the owners. It was I was reporting directly to the owners of the company, and I remember that they would tell me that I was running the company, and I was always like, "What are you talking about? I'm just doing my job, right?" Like
Right.
I didn't understand that all the things I was doing was running the company. Over a few years, I started to understand like that was running a company, right? And then I moved right from that to the virtual CFO agency that I was working in, where I mentioned I was the person behind the person. I was working really closely with the CEO all the time, and so for me. I think I was lucky to have had 17 years of really, really close insight to
Yeah.
running a company. I had built teams the whole time. I was building my teams within the company. So that part came very easily. The hiring my first couple employees happened somewhat accidentally because I had people coming to me and I was like, well, sure, I can use the help, right? Like just kind of took them on very, casually, but then all of a sudden I was like, oh, can you take on this and this and this and this and this because I have so much going on, right? So that part was easy, and now it's just kind of trying to figure out like from here to the next stage of the business. How do we make it profitable? I mean, right now we don't have. There's not a problem with profit, but it's more of just figuring out the financial side because it's all so new and figuring out, how to continue to bring people on who we can delegate work to, and I can focus on, my biggest concern right now is just like focusing on what the clients need,
Right.
making sure that all of that's happening, which just comes with time, with nurturing a team and getting everyone in place with what they need to do. But then so that I can then focus on the business and growing the business. And so I think, yeah, I mean, I think the profitability, I think, is going to just come with a little bit of time, just settling into the business as it is.
Yeah, I think most people think of naively that business growth is like this straight line, and it's not, and it's much more like lines and plateaus, and you can grow and you're making money, but then you've got to hire employees because you can't do anymore, and then
Mm-hmm.
potentially your profit goes down for a little while um, as you then scale it to the next level. But the the important point is to not get stuck on that plateau,
Mm-hmm.
because it's the very first entrepreneurs organization event I went to. The speaker was Vern Harnish. He wrote Rockefeller Habits and Scaling Up. He's known as the growth guy. And he asked this room of about 40 entrepreneurs, how many of you could fire people, work less, and make more money. And 2/3, 3/4 of the room hands went up. And that's what happens without intentional growth is you end up building this monster where you're actually working more and making less. And that's not what you want. That is not what you want.
Right. Yeah.
It's perfectly you're perfectly fine staying on that plateau if it's a profit plateau. Like if you're just making cash and you're fine where you are, stay there. Don't force it. So is that kind of what you're talking about and what you're mulling over now?
Yeah. Well, we are right now it's the people that are doing the work for us, like that. I've got 3 team members now, and I'm really fortunate because part of my past also involved outsourcing to the Philippines. And so I have great connections there where I'm able to bring people on in a way that is really not breaking the bank in any way.
Right.
And I think, I don't worry, but like I think about the future of like, okay, when I'm ready to hire somebody who is, US based or just higher costs, that's going to be a bigger lift to try to make that work. Right. And then those are people that I will end up having to spend a lot of time training and developing and getting to the point, which I think that all goes
higher
into
level jobs. Like this isn't,
But it's like those people, like you were talking about, like where your time is now spent on that and you're not bringing in the business. So like always figuring out that balance of all those things.
Yes. And for the listeners that haven't outsourced to the Philippines, or Latin America, you're talking about 1/3 of the cost of a US based. Is that your experience? Hey listeners, are you ready to turn your passion into profit? Then grab a copy of Profit First for Creatives. Click the link in the show notes to purchase a copy. And if you're not ready to make that full commitment, you can download a free copy of the first chapter. Check it out right now.
Probably 1/3 or less.
Yeah. So it is significantly cheaper. And so that does, and I think people should do that, where it makes sense. A lot of things don't work in that environment, but I was talking to one of my accountant colleagues in New York, and he's a partner of a larger firm there, and they have like a whole firm and team and building in like Manila, and like he goes out there like 4 times a year and works on team building and culture, and like they're really integral to the organization. And he said that's what makes it successful. I think the idea of like treating it more like Upwork or Fiverr is where you don't get the best results.
Right. Yeah. Well, so like I said, I have years of experience outsourcing like that. So I have those connections, but all of that started with making a lot of not necessarily mistakes, but a lot of trial and error, right? Like I did a lot of hiring through Upwork. I've hired through Fiverr. I've hired through a great organization called Virtual Coworker. I love that organization. It's great for finding somebody. Their minimum is 20 hours a week. So you can't hire through them till you're ready to hire that person for 20 hours per week. But you can really be specific about what you're looking for. So if you're looking for somebody with design skills or, a virtual assistant or whatever that is, you can be very specific, and they do they look for the people for you. They bring you 3 people to interview, they make the process really easy. I've also hired through them and had bad experiences, right? But I've had great experiences. So anytime I hire, like if I do hire through Upwork, I tend to, like if I have one article I need, I'll hire 2 or 3 people, because then I'm like, I'm going to make sure I'm going to get the article I need. And then it's trial and error with these folks. If somebody works out great, then I'll continue to use that person. But I never go into it thinking like the first person I hire is going to be the best person ever, and it's just going to be great from there. Like you really have to do kind of your own homework, and it's not always easy, but when you find the right people, keep them forever.
No, I think that's a great tool. As a matter of fact, I was talking to our head of marketing about just that because she was looking to hire a marketing director, and she wasn't sure of this candidate's abilities. And I'm like, well, pay her to do a task, and then you'll find out whether she can or can't do it. Like there's nothing wrong with testing employees or contractors to see if they are the fit. I mean, because there's only so much you're going to get through an interview and reading a resume.
Right. Exactly.
I'm going to pivot, as I often do. So you talked about remote working. Have you read the book Work Sucks?
No, I haven't. I got to write that down. Okay. Who's the author of that? Do you know?
I don't know. It's two women. I read it 15 years ago, I think. Okay. But they were the inventors of ROWE, results only work environment.
Yep.
And we had made that investment in that change prior to COVID. And frankly, it allowed us to progress through the pandemic and out the other side seamlessly. Like I can't imagine if we didn't have that foundation in place and went into that because we were all always in the office. But it seems like there's still this clash of culture. I mentioned Alphabet and Google, and they're wanting, people to come back into the office and the pushback. But what I believe that remote work is permanent. There's no way to go back. There's no way to put that horse back in the barn, genie back in the bottle, whatever analogy you want to use. Why do you think management companies are still resistant to it?
I think so. I've had the experience, like I mentioned, I've worked remotely for 18 years, but when my company was my most recent company where I was an employee, when they were acquired by a brick and mortar company. So I also had a couple years of experience working in a hybrid environment, which was eye-opening to me because I have worked remotely for so long that the ROWE concept to me is like it's just common sense to me, right? Like I don't care. I say that like I don't care. I'm just not a micromanager. I do not care what, when people are working, what hours they're working, how they're doing their work. What I want is here's the results that I want. Right. And so, we work towards that. And that's the most important thing in a hybrid environment. And one of the employees at that firm where they were in the office told me that, everybody knows that you have to come into the office to get people to get things done. And I was like, well, you acquired a remote firm. So what? Yeah. Right. Like here we were all remote. They were in office, but they're very flexible work policy where you can work from home, so you work from home all the time if you want to. But the attitude, the culture was you have to come into the office to make sure things are getting done, which means they have to see you in the office. Management has to see you in the office to think you're working, right? So I think that is a big reason why the remote thing is such a struggle right now is that like bigger companies or even just certain cultures, it doesn't have to be a certain size. It's just the culture of a company. If they don't, if you have people who are micromanagers or who think that seeing your face means that you're working, that they don't get the concept of the results based work, right? They don't work that way. It's if I need something done, I walk down to your desk and I tell you that I need this done. And, the way that I work is I message people. We have online ways of communicating. We use Notion specifically. So in Notion, I can put notes in there. If it's I mean, I just try to avoid urgent. I was going to say, if it's urgent, I can handle it differently, but I just try to avoid urgent. Like, nothing should
Right.
be urgent. We're not curing cancer. we are providing marketing services for people. So, if we're planning ahead and we're documenting things and we're making sure that everything is asynchronous and available, there's no reason why my assistant in the Philippines needs to work my hours. Like, if I'm just giving her notes throughout the day when I'm working, I come in the next morning and she's handled the things that I asked her to do, right? Like, that to me is productive. And I don't need to walk down the office and see her face, or walk down the hall and see her face to know that she's working. So I don't know. I think that.
No, I agree. I agree with you, what you said. And I think it is, you mentioned the word culture, and I think it's not just work culture. It's American culture in the sense, I'm 54. I was raised with a very strong Protestant work ethic, and the idea that you have to work hard, like that's just the expectation, right? And I ran into, in the last 12, 18 months, where I realized that it was actually counterproductive. It wasn't even not productive. It was counterproductive, because I would get my stuff that I needed to get done. And then I would start meddling. I'd start checking in with people, like, oh, how's this going? Well, how's that going? And the reality is, the problem was me, that I felt like I had to be working. And it took me a good 9 months. You'll laugh at me. I'm in this office. I went to an office in my building that had no windows. I had a stand-up desk and a stool. I had no chair and nothing on the walls. Didn't even have music. I didn't even take a speaker in there. And what it forced me to do was, I only wanted to be there in that uncomfortable environment when I had to be there. And so I broke this habit of, like, I'm just here because I'm supposed to be here. But I think that's what it is just like the mindset, like, you got to be in the office. Why? Well, I don't know. I can't see you. What are you doing? I mean,
Yeah.
It's not rational.
Yeah.
It isn't.
Yeah. But those cultural things are hard to, it's hard to put a finger on exactly what's happening. Right. But it is this weird expectation of visibility means productivity, and it's not true.
Well, and changing a culture is extremely hard, because usually what that means is you got to change people. And, you can't just force people to believe something or feel something that they didn't before. You usually have to replace them. Kelly, I know our time is short. Thank you very much for your experience. Share, how do people find you if they want to be elevated like you?
Well, for one, I have my own podcast. It's Beyond the Bestseller, where I feature female authors of nonfiction books. So thought leaders who have a message to share. I see your face. The listeners can't see your face, but you're cringing because you're an author.
I'm not a female. One of my employees, long-term employees, she's no longer here, not because of what she said, but in any case, she called me. She said, "You're just a lesbian in a man's body." So I could be on the show. That's up to you. But
I think I need to start another podcast that's open to anyone. But really, the reason I wanted to start that podcast was because I'm passionate about women in the workplace, and I wanted to elevate women specifically. But also, you can find me. So if you're not a woman, you can find me on LinkedIn
or an author.
Or an author. Yeah, right. But you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes, Christian, because my name is not easy to spell, but it is my name on LinkedIn. And yeah, I'd love to connect with you there.
We'll have all of those links in the show notes. Thank you again. Listeners, if you like what you heard, please rate the podcast, share the podcast, subscribe to the podcast. You can forward it too. That's the same thing as sharing. In any case, if you don't like what you heard, shoot us a message and tell us what you'd like to hear, and I'll replace Kelly. Until then, ta-ta for now.